I'd like to welcome each and every one of you to this afternoon's agenda meeting on this weather that's more akin to mid-August than mid-June. But we'll go ahead and review the action items, which will be addressed next Tuesday evening on the 21st of June right here at City Hall at 6 o'clock in the evening. And I'll call upon Mr. Bill Burrough, City Manager, for those action items.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the board. Your first item is a resolution, R-22-104, a resolution approving the City of Hot Springs financial statements for April 2022, and Finance Director Doretha Yates will present.
Thank you,
Welcome.
Mr. Burrough. This is your monthly financial statements, routine in the format that we give you for April 2022.
Any questions of Doretha?
Just
Director
one.
Garcia?
Yeah, the report that you and Barbie's been working on, will that be included?
The CFO report will be in this.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
Next is Resolution R-22-105, a resolution awarding a term contract to Univar Solutions USA, Inc. for fluorosilicic acid. And Cody Howell is here to present that item for utilities.
I'm Cody Howell, the Water Production Facilities Manager. City of Hot Springs staff would like to award the fluoride acid to Univar Solution, Inc. out of Kent, Washington. This contract will provide for 4 12-month extensions upon mutual agreement. In 2011, the Arkansas State Legislature introduced Act 197 that requires municipalities with a population of 5,000 or greater to maintain fluoride levels in drinking water. The City of Hot Springs has been utilizing fluoride in the system since 2015. The bid received from Univar has been reviewed by the City of Hot Springs and meets all the required specifications. 2 bids were received, and Univar was the lowest bidder.
Very good. Any questions? Thank you.
Next, we have Resolution R-22-106, a resolution awarding a term contract to Shannon Chemical Corporation for blended polyphosphates. And again, Mr. Howell.
Shannon Chemical Corp. is out of Malvern, Pennsylvania. The contract will provide for 4 12-month extensions upon mutual consent. Phosphates are used in water treatment systems to help with corrosion of water mains and plumbing, nuisance metals in the water supply, and to improve the quality of water by removing scale deposits and stabilizing free chlorine disinfectant residuals. City of Hot Springs staff has reviewed the bid received from Shannon Chemical Corp. and it is in exact accordance with the specifications required. 2 bids were received, and Shannon Chemical Corp. was the lowest bidder. Hot Springs is requesting the term contract be rewarded, approved on mutual consent by the vendor in the City of Hot Springs.
What's the dollar amount of this contract and the one we just addressed on the fluorosilicic? You recall?
It's a term contract, so it's based on the unit or the volume, but he should have some estimates on what we typically spend.
Yeah.
I know on the fluoride we use about 136 pounds per year. That was based off of last year's. Of course, it fluctuates with demand with the system. Our current price on fluoride is about 23 cents per pound right now. So I think it's gone up to about 28 cents per pound just with price increasing on fluoride. And as far as the price for phosphate, it's going to cost about $90,000 more annually with the price increase.
It's going to be somewhere around $260,000.
Yeah, right.
You'll have to stay within budgetary constraints, obviously.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Next, we have Resolution R-22-107, a resolution authorizing a memorandum of understanding between the City of Hot Springs and the Hot Springs School District regarding contract payment for school resource officers, and Chief Chapman is here to present that item.
Good afternoon. So this is a re-signing of our standard SRO, School Resource Officer contract with the Hot Springs School District. As you know, we in the past maintained 3 to 4 school resource officers at Lakeside and Hot Springs. We're down to a singular officer at Hot Springs High. He rotates campuses. This is a standard 75% salary and benefits over the course of 9 months, and will save us $46,550 in salary and benefits that the school will pick up.
Any questions of the chief? Thank you.
Next, we have Resolution R-22-108, a resolution authorizing the request for and acceptance of grant funding for salary stipends authorized by the Arkansas Full-Time Law Enforcement Officer Salary Stipend Act of 2022. And again, Chief.
So this actually is not a grant. We are treating these funds as a grant seeking application and acceptance of. This is Act 224 that Governor Hutchinson signed several months back, creating a $5,000 stipend for all certified law enforcement officers across the state of Arkansas. It's about a $40 million commitment from the state. In addition to that, it authorizes a $10 million equipment grant fund that each department can apply for body cameras, other equipment that they may need. So this would give us authorization to accept the $5,000 for all of our certified officers, and then to apply for equipment through the $10 million grant program.
Any questions of chief on this? Thank you.
Thanks, sir.
Next, we have Resolution R-22-109, a resolution amending the table of authorized personnel within the Parks and Trails Department. And our Parks and Trails Director, Anthony Whittington, is here to discuss the item.
Thank you. This is, staff recommends adding a Trails Coordinator part-time position to the Parks and Trails Department. This is essentially the position that Ken Freeman vacated, our longtime Trails Coordinator for many years. Ken Freeman was a contract part-time position. We were unsuccessful in trying to locate another party to contract such services, and now we're seeking to basically make that a part-time employee position, 20 hours a week. That'll be a pay grade 12. I believe it pays $18 an hour. So with that being said, we are recommending the remainder of the year with the employee starting 8/1, $9,970, and a budget transfer will requisite those funds from contract labor over to part-time labor. So essentially, we're just moving this position from contract over to employee position.
Any questions of Anthony? Thank you.
Thank you.
Next is Resolution R-22-110, a resolution authorizing the filing and acceptance of an Arkansas Department of Parks, Heritage, and Tourism grant to support Phase 2 of Velocity Park. Again, Mr. Whittington.
Thank you. This is a filing acceptance of Phase 2 of Velocity Park. As you may recall, in 2021, we received funding for Phase 1 of the park, which is hopefully break ground in the next 3 to 4 weeks. Hopefully by Tuesday at the board meeting, I'll have y'all a date of when our groundbreaking is. Phase 1, like I said, the park will be located at 325 Valley Street, where the old Cobb recycling property used to be, right along the Hot Springs Creek Greenway Trail. This is, again, for Phase 2, which is a 50-50 outdoor recreation grant. It's the same grant that built David Watkins Park, as well as funding Phase 1. We do have a $100,000 match in the 2022 Parks and Trails budget. I do have a COA that'll be attached. And so we are requesting $100,000 match from the Outdoor Recreation Fund for a total project of $200,000. So the due date for this grant will be August 26th, and usually we find out about November, December if we get this grant. So.
Any questions of Anthony on this topic? Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we have Resolution 22-111, and it's consider approval for out-of-state travel for Board of Directors to attend the National League of Cities City Summit in Kansas City, Missouri. Mayor Resolution number 8496 is amended, requires Board of Directors out-of-state travel to be approved by the board, contingent upon funds being available for said travel. In order to expedite the process of making the various travel arrangements required, staff recommends the board approve the associated out-of-state travel costs for the directors. There are some early bird dates there that we try to meet to save on the registration. The actual meeting itself is in November 17th through the 19th A Hot Springs delegation will be traveling to Kansas City, Missouri to attend the National Leagues of Cities City Summit. District 1 Director Aaron Holliday, District 3 Director Marcia Dobbs-Smith, and District 6 Director Steve Trusty have expressed interest in serving as part of the Hot Springs delegation. You know, this has been virtual for quite some time, but I can tell you in attending several of these city summits over the years, this is extremely good training for anyone in an elected position for the board. So just want to bring that to the board, and that'll be to consider that travel.
Any questions of Bill? Thank you.
Next, we have it's a public hearing. To hold a public hearing on the confirmation of existing rates charged for services of the City of Hot Springs, Arkansas wastewater system and the proposed issuance of bonds secured by the revenues of the system. Mr. Albright.
Mayor, members of the board, this section of your agenda is the required public hearings over the next 3 items on your agenda, having to do with confirming rates for services of the wastewater system and the issuance of bonds. This will simply be the public comment period, opening up as a public hearing.
Very good.
Next, we'll enter your new business of the evening. This is your first ordinance. It's Ordinance 2222, an ordinance confirming rates for services rendered by the wastewater system of the City of Hot Springs, Arkansas, and prescribing other matters related thereto. Again, Mr. Albright.
Mayor, members of the board, this ordinance is required to confirm our existing rates, not to change the rates. There is no increase involved here whatsoever. This is simply tied to the bonds in order for the public to understand that these bonds are based on the rates that you are confirming.
Any questions of Brian? Thank you.
Next, we have Ordinance 02223, an ordinance authorizing the issuance of wastewater revenue bonds, Series 2022A and Series 2022B, for the purpose of financing a portion of the cost of betterments and improvements to the wastewater system of the City of Hot Springs, Arkansas, providing for the payment of the principal of and interest on the bonds, prescribing other matters relating thereto, and declaring an emergency. I will say that Bob Wright with Cruz and Associates, our financial advisor, is here should the board have any questions regarding this item.
Only thing that I would point out, Bill, for the benefit of the board and the public, the reason that these are coming to you in different series, this ordinance has to do with a private placement, with a portion of them, Series A, being taxable, and a portion of them under Series B being non-taxable.
Was he going to explain any of those?
Bob, did you have an overview, short order?
I do, and if you just wanted to go ahead and do that third one, then I can just cover.
Very good. This is along with Ordinance 02224, an ordinance authorizing the issuance of wastewater revenue bonds, Series 2022C, for the purpose of financing a portion of the cost of betterments and improvements to the wastewater system of the City of Hot Springs, Arkansas, providing for the payment of the principal of and interest on the bonds, prescribing other matters relating thereto, and declaring an emergency. Mr. Wright?
Appreciate it. I did hand out before the meeting a couple of pages, and as part of explanation, as y'all know, you've been on the wastewater side, been answering to the consent administrative order, and the rate study that Dan Jackson prepared for you over a year ago and projected, and you adopted the wastewater rates by ordinance. He on his projections, we were looking at probably 2024 to issue the debt. He projected that the borrowing interest rate would be 3%. In this first page I handed out, you can see that Bill and I discussed back in early February as rates started to move on us, like we don't have a lot of cushion, that if rates move up too much, you start getting into squeezing your margins on what your rate analyst, Dan Jackson, provided to you. So let's get ahead of that. Let's go ahead and get these bonds locked in. And rates have not stopped since we started that process. You can see on that far right side, that's just movement as of yesterday. What they said on TV this morning before I left was the movement in rates yesterday was astonishing. Fed is meeting in the morning or tomorrow and providing their results as far as expectation of a 50 basis point rise in rates. There's discussion it could be 75. Discussion, some people said it could be as drastic as a 1 percentage point movement. We don't expect that, but rates are certainly not cooperating. So the sooner we can get something done, the better. So what we're looking at, and why there's 3 ordinances or 2 relating to the bonds, Series A and B, and what we did on the last transaction we did for you, which was just a refinance, in this market and with rates that are moving up on a rapid basis as this, we can go work directly with banks, either Regions or Simmons or national banks, that we place the bonds, and they can lock in the rates much quicker than on a public offering. But banks have a limit as far as how far out they can go. Since we are issuing $10 million in taxable bonds, and that goes out about 11 years, that's what Series A would be. The $10 million is because of, we don't want to limit ourselves on the 3-year spend down requirement. The Series B, we have an interest from one of the banks that they would take tax exempt years 12 to 15. And we've run all these numbers, and as these rates continue to move, we've monitored that. We can save the city and save the ratepayers a good amount of money by going that placement route on Series A and B versus what a public bond issue would be. So that's why you're looking at A and B placement, and then Series C, years 15 out to 30, would be a public sale. Raymond James Stevens will be handling the public sale next Tuesday. We are actually getting quotes in on the placement this Thursday, so we can go ahead and pick and work on the documents on the placement so that can all be brought to you on next Tuesday. So that's kind of the basis of what we're doing. The other pages, just the one thing to look at on page 2, these are the projected rates and such from Dan Jackson when he provided you the rate study. And it actually kind of flipped it. So basically on the far right side is projecting 2022, and then it goes 23 all the way out to 2030. And right there in the middle of the page, you can look under the projected 2023 with the amount of revenue you generate. You collect revenues, you operate the system. So it's projected in 2023 you would have $8.78 million to pay for your debt. And our principal and interest in year 2023 is 7.3. So our coverage right now, if rates don't move anymore, in that 1 year is a 119. That's razor thin. We don't want to go much less than that. We don't want to go less than that at all. So that's why we're kind of in a hurry. Let's get this locked in. If it keeps moving, we don't want to revisit any additional rates on your ratepayers. That's why we're trying to get stop the bleeding, get that locked in. So that's what we're dealing with there as far as the rate projection that he provided. The rest of these are simply the same thing you've looked at on every deal we've done in the past. It breaks down the cost of issuance on the Series A, B, and C. We're planning to issue $46.015 million in debt, and that would provide the city $45 million for the wastewater project. The rates as of late yesterday afternoon on the Series A, an updated quote we got was 4.41%. That's the taxable piece. On the Series B tax exempt, we got a placement quote of 3.64. And then on the public piece, Series C, we're anywhere from 4.4 out to 4.6. Those are rates we hadn't seen in quite a while. We've been very fortunate to ride that wave down on interest rates over the last number of years. It's turned, so again, let's lock this in as fast as we can. The last page would be the overall, and what the overall wastewater system debt would be. The one thing to look at on the very last page. Right now, our TIC, our true interest cost, so what is our rate when you factor in all the cost of issuance? 4.47. So historically, that's still very good. That seems very high compared to what we've been showing you over the last 4, 5, 6 years. But that's where we are. He projected 3% borrowing cost. We're at 4.5. So we need that to kind of sit for the next week to where we can get that locked in and put everything in place. So that's what will be brought to you, the ordinances and the public hearing next Tuesday.
Any questions of Bob on these 3 items?
Now, the public offering, that's municipal bonds, so is that non-taxable?
Yes, ma'am. The public
Right.
on Series C, that's tax exempt. The Series B is also tax exempt. It's that initial, we want to get the taxable, because those are higher rates. We want to amortize that first. So
Right.
that's the first 11 years.
Thank you.
Thank y'all.
Just maybe you can educate me a little bit here. With the continued rise or projected rise in interest rates, why is there a market today for this? Why wouldn't they wait till tomorrow or the next tomorrow?
That's a great question. And we do see that. We see a lot of institutions and people that think they're smarter than the market. They're like, we'll wait till next week. Or we didn't want to price tomorrow during the, because the Fed comes out with their announcement at 1 o'clock. There's nothing going on tomorrow. Everybody's going to kind of see what happens. But the unexpected can certainly sway the market again some more. It could turn the rates back down to where it helps a little bit. So we avoid tomorrow, go ahead and get it locked in. There are people that are looking at these kind of rates they have not seen in a number of years. Tax exempt rate at 4.4, 4.5. And that interests them. They still have to invest money. They're sitting in cash. So there won't be any problem. Raymond James Stevens, they'll get the bond sold and probably have quite a few people stepping up trying to buy at these rates. Mm-hmm. But there's some that will sit on the sideline and don't want to go ahead and commit their funds. So
If the Federal Reserve does what they stated they're going to do, they'll keep raising them through September.
They're expected the rest of this year and even into next year to continue to raise. They might get pretty aggressive tomorrow. I wouldn't be surprised if we see 75 basis points. I mean, what's going on with gas and inflation and all that. They might really try to get on top of it. The market is priced in right now 50 basis points. It probably moved a little bit yesterday because there's now on the table it could be 75. So these rates, barring something unforeseen, rates should be pretty good at what we're looking at here. We've got a little bit of cushion. It's the unforeseen that that continues to move it. The one good thing is, once we close the bonds, we're going to have $45 million that no longer earning 0.1%. You'll be able to add to your construction fund, so for your ratepayers. But the last thing we wanted to do, and that's why we started this process 3 months ago, is we don't want to go back to the ratepayers after you've already put a rate increase in place. We don't want the market to force another one. So if we can get this locked in with where we are right now, that buys you that time, that gets that project done and takes care of that CAO. Or hopefully most of it, at least.
Any other questions, Bob? Thank you.
Thank y'all
for being here.
Appreciate it.
Next, we have ordinance O-2225, an ordinance accepting the annexation of certain territory located on 56.2 acres on real property ID 3840 to the city of Hot Springs, Arkansas, assigning the lands to a zoning district and to a board district, revising the future land use map and for other purposes. And Ms. Harmony Morrissey will present.
Thank you. The petitioner is EPR Parks, who owns Magic Springs Theme and Water Park. The park is actually located within the city limits. The petitioner has presented a petition to the Garland County Court requesting annexation of the parcel to their north. The county judge held the public hearing on May 5th and found that the petitioner did meet the statutory requirements for annexation. Judge Mahoney entered the order on May 13th, which began the 30-day waiting period during which interested parties could institute a proceeding to prevent the annexation. The waiting period closed yesterday, and the city has received no notice of any protest actions filed. Petitioner also filed an application for initial zoning with the Planning Commission requesting C4 Regional Commercial Open Display District, which is the same zoning designation as their contiguous property on which the theme park is currently situated. The Planning Commission met on June 9th and voted 7-0 to recommend to the board that they amend the zoning map to assign initial zoning of C4 as requested by the applicant and a future land use map designation of tourist commercial. Should you approve the annexation, District 1 would be the most appropriate district assignment as the contiguous property is located in that board district.
Any questions of Harmony? Thank you.
Next, we have ordinance O-2226, an ordinance amending ordinance number 6405 and ordinance number 6410, regulating short-term residential rental business within the city of Hot Springs, Arkansas, declaring an emergency and for other purposes. And I believe Mr. Albright's going to cover this item.
Thank you, Mr. Burrough. Ordinance 6405 was amended by Ordinance 6410. It established certain limitations on the aggregate number of short-term residential rental licenses within residentially zoned districts. At the Board of Directors work session held on May 31st, we discussed the status of the short-term residential rental licenses and their impact on local neighborhoods. Based upon the discussion that we had that evening, not that we reached a consensus, but based on what was discussed, staff is recommending that the aggregate number of short-term residential rental licenses within such residentially zoned districts should be reduced from 500 per calendar year to 400 per calendar year. In order to accomplish that, so that we know what the number is at the end of the year, we are further recommending that applications for special use permits cease on November 1st. This will allow for adequate time to go through the Board of Zoning Adjustments process on the appeals, so that on January 1, we will know what that number is. On January 1, if the number of such licenses or such special use permits exceeds 400, then the existing licenses that so exceed 400 are eligible and subject to the annual renewal process that is set forth in Section 4J of Ordinance Number 6405. Last week I sent you an advanced copy of the draft that I've been working on, and in that advanced draft there was a provision in there where we were also recommending that the lapse period be changed from May 1st to February 15th. In looking at that since last Thursday when I sent it out, it really exceeded the discussion that we had at the board's work session, and it really doesn't accomplish anything other than squeezing the time down. So my recommendation and the draft that you will see in your packet will not have that Section 3 that was in last week's draft. So the time limits will remain the same and thereby stay consistent with the other business licenses that we issue to other businesses inside the city.
Which is what?
Well, there's a
Thought it was it not the end of February? Or?
well, that I was changing it to February. The way that it reads now, Mayor, their penalties begin everything is due first day of January, first day of business. There's a 10% late fee on March 1st. There's a 30% late fee on April 1st. And if they don't renew by May 1st, it lapses. What I sent you last week would have proposed a lapse on February the 15th. It doesn't change the number, and it is not consistent with our other business licenses. So unless there's an objection, I was going to remove Section 3 of that advanced draft to be included in your packet.
So the current business license is March 1,
Yes.
April 1, and
Yes. All business licenses have a late fee on March 1 of 10%, 30% on April 1, and so forth.
so STR and the business license will be exactly the same?
They are now,
Yeah.
at least with respect to the time limit. Other businesses' licenses typically don't lapse. Only the STRs lapse. A regular business license can come in and renew and simply pay the penalties associated with that renewal.
Director Garcia.
Just clarification, I thought last year that on business license for this year, that dates were changed, where they had from May 1st to the end of January, and some fees were raised, because we had quite a bit of discussion about that. What was there, did that discussion not happen?
I don't follow what you're saying.
That the change was made
In
from
May.
March 1st on regular business license, and that time was reduced to the end of, it was late past January.
For a regular business license that's not a regulated business, that is true. There is no lapse. Again, they can renew at any time. They just have to pay the back penalty. For STRs, if they get to May 1st, that license is going to lapse.
But shouldn't their late be the same? Late penalty
It
be the
is.
same as the regular?
It is, as I said, 10%
Oh, okay.
on March 1st.
I misunderstood then.
Yeah, 10% on March 1st, 30% on April the 1st, and May the 1st it lapses.
Yeah, but I thought regular business was now late in February, and you had to start paying a late fee in February when you if you wait till then to renew.
I think it's March 1st.
Oh.
I will say this,
Whatever it is, it should be the same, except the lapse. I understand what you said about
Yeah,
the lapsing.
yeah.
I just misunderstood when it was late on the regular.
Maybe this will help to clarify it. What I sent you last week as an advanced draft would have changed what you adopted last May. Without that, it will stay the same. And so I'm saying it needs to just stay the same with respect to the timing of the renewal, the late fees, and the ultimate lapse on May the 1st.
Doretha, do you recall why am I thinking mid-February for the business license? Am I wrong on that? Was that moved up a couple weeks? Or is it still February 28th?
I think we changed that to the final due date.
Before penalty?
Is after March 31st, I think is when the 30% kicks in, if I'm not, I believe that's correct. I think the 10% kicks in at the end of February.
Okay.
Carmen's got it right here.
Put it on the screen for us, if you don't mind.
Here it is.
This is for regular business licenses.
Right.
That she was referring to.
So the last day of February is one day before March 1. The last day of March is one day before April 1.
Yeah, so that's the 10%, and then it goes up from there.
Yes,
Yeah,
ma'am.
that was just the clarification I needed. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
All right, any further questions of Brian?
You got your sister.
Mr. Burrough, that completes our action items.
It does. That
for
is all
next
your,
Tuesday.
that is it.
So there'll be no further business. We are adjourned. Thank you all.
We will
Stay
have
cool.
a